his hunting gear, staff, iron stick, nets, and cage, and set free the she-pigeon. He had imprisoned us. He walked away from his former life. Ishma felt a sense of liberation wash over him. He would observe the most rigid vows, practicing penances that would reduce him to emaciation, yet make him capable of bearing hunger, thirst, and hardship. The world would see and knew Bhishma, one who...
In a desolate clearing, a she-pigeon sat alone, her eyes fixed on the spot where her husband had met his Demas. The memory of their time together was still fresh in her mind, and grief had taken hold of her heart. Bhishma, the wise sage who had witnessed this tragic event, watched with compassion as the pigeon's sorrow deepened. The she-pigeon's lamentations echoed through the air, a poignant expression of her anguish. "Oh, my dear Lord," she cried, "I remember not a single instance where you did me harm. Even in widowhood a woman is reduced to misery. Without her husband she becomes helpless and pitiful, relying on the charity of others. For survival." Her words were laced with longing, as if recalling the joys they had shared. She reminisced about their carefree days when they would stroll through valleys, splash in river springs, and perch on tree tops, basking in each other's company. "We roamed the skies together," she said wistfully, "and I was filled with happiness. But now those memories seemed like a distant dream, lost forever." The pigeon's sorrow knew no bounds as she recalled the limitations of a woman's life without her husband. "My Lord's love and protection are what make me whole," she declared. "What woman would not adore her Lord? He is her sole refuge, her protector from harm." With tears streaming down her face, she confessed that life was meaningless without him. As she spoke, the pigeon's words turned into a lamentation of her own mortality. "Abandoning all my worldly possessions," she said, "I have no choice but to take refuge in you, my Lord." Her voice trembled with emotion as she asked, "What chaste woman can bear the burden of life without her Lord?" In that moment the pigeon's resolve was set with a heavy heart. She made her way towards the blazing fire that had claimed her husband. As she cast herself into its flames, she beheld a vision of her beloved Lord. He sat on a celestial chariot adorned with fine garlands and exquisite robes, surrounded by innumerable beings who had earned their place among the stars through meritorious deeds. As the pigeon's spirit merged with her husband, she was transported to the firmament, where they were reunited in joy. The celestial carriages bearing the worthy souls of those who had lived virtuous lives surrounded them, and together they soared into the heavens, bathed in the radiance of their love and devotion. In that moment the pigeon knew that her sacrifice had earned her a place among the stars, where she would forever be with her beloved Lord. In the realm of ancient tales, Bhishma, a revered sage, shared with King Yudhishthira a story that would forever change his perspective on life. It was the tale of a humble faller who, upon witnessing the celestial pigeon and its devoted mate soaring through the skies, became consumed by sorrow. The faller's heart yearned for such a high end, and he vowed to attain it through austere practices. Just like the pigeon with a resolute spirit, the faller abandoned his former life of killing birds for a living. He set out on a perilous journey, determined to renounce all worldly desires and live only on air. His resolve was unwavering as he traversed vast distances, ignoring even the most tantalizing sights that might have distracted him from his goal. As he wandered, the faller chanced upon an idyllic lake teeming with lotus flowers and diverse waterfall. Its beauty was so captivating that it could quench the thirst of any parched soul. Yet, driven by his unwavering resolve, the faller deliberately turned a blind eye to its splendor and pressed on into the heart of a dense forest. The forest was home to ferocious beasts and sharp thorns that lacerated the faller's body. His skin was torn, and blood oozed from every wound. As he traversed the unforgiving terrain, undeterred by his suffering, the faller continued on his journey, driven by an insatiable desire for spiritual liberation. Fate had other plans for him, however. A bushfire, ignited by a powerful gust of wind, swept through the forest like a raging demon. Flames danced across the landscape, consuming everything in their path. The very air was filled with sparks and embers as the inferno raged on. In the midst of this apocalyptic scene, the faller's heart swelled with joy. He hastened towards the spreading conflagration, eager to surrender his mortal coil and attain spiritual liberation. As he succumbed to the flames, his body was cleansed of all its sins, and his spirit ascended to the realm of heaven. There, in a splendor
that rivaled Indra's glory among the Yachas and Gandharvas. The follower shone like a radiant star. His devotion had earned him a place alongside the pageant and its mate, who too had ascended to heaven through their righteous acts. The story served as a testament to the transformative power of selfless devotion, and the reward that awaited those who followed in the footsteps of these high-souled individuals. Bhishma's tale concluded with a poignant message for King Yudhishthira. The protection of a suppliant was an act of great merit, one that could even cleanse the soul of the slayer of a cow. By listening to this sacred story and emulating its virtues, one could transcend worldly suffering.
In the midst of his royal court, King Yudhishthira turned to the venerable Bhishma and posed a question that would spark a tale of guilt, regret, and redemption. O best of the Bharas, he asked, when a person commits sin from want of judgment, how may he be cleansed from it? Tell me everything about it. Bhishma's eyes gazed into the past as he began to recount an ancient narrative that had been passed down through generations. He spoke of King Janamejaya, a mighty ruler who was once renowned for his great energy and wisdom. However, on one fateful occasion, Janamejaya fell prey to a grave mistake. He killed a Brahmana from want of judgment. The weight of his sin bore down upon the king like a mountain. Range his subjects, including his priests, abandoned him in disgust, leaving him isolated and heartbroken. Consumed by regret, Janamejaya retreated into the forest, determined to atone for his transgression. He wandered the earth, seeking guidance from wise sages and brahmanas, but none could alleviate his guilt. Years passed like autumn leaves rustling in the wind as Janamejaya performed the most austere penances, hoping to purify himself of the stain on his conscience. His once majestic palace now stood empty, a testament to his downfall. The king's subjects whispered among themselves about their former ruler's fate, how he had brought shame upon himself and his lineage. One day, as Janamejaya wandered through a dense forest, he chanced upon the sage Indrata, son of Sanaka. Approaching the wise man with reverence, the king touched his feet in humility. But instead of offering comfort or guidance, Indrata's words cut deep into the king's soul. Thou hast committed a great sin, the sage declared. Thou hast been guilty of foeticide. Why hast thou come here? What business hast thou with us? The wise man's rebuke was like a thunderclap on a summer day, shaking Janamejaya to his very core. Indrata continued to scold the king. His words dripped with sorrow and disappointment. "The presence does not give us pleasure," he said. "The person smells like blood. The appearance is like that of a corpse." The wise man's accusations pierced Janamejaya's heart like 1,000 arrows, leaving him feeling hollow and defeated. Yet even in the midst of such harsh criticism, Indrata offered a glimmer of hope. He revealed to the king the true nature of his existence, how his life was but a fleeting shadow on the wall of time, and that his actions would ultimately determine his fate in the next world. The wise man's words were like a cold wind blowing through the forest, forcing Janamejaya to confront. In the presence of the revered sage Sanaka, King Janamejaya stood before him, his heart heavy with remorse. The king's words poured out like a river as he confessed to the sage that he had indeed acted in ways that were deserving of rebuke. "His sage Janamejaya began, you chastise me, and rightly, so I have been guilty of wrongdoings, and my conscience burns within me like a blazing fire. My mind is shrouded in darkness, haunted by the memories of my past transgressions. I fear Yama's wrath, and long to be free from this burden that weighs upon my heart." Sanaka listened attentively, his expression a mask of calm wisdom. He nodded sympathetically as Janamejaya continued, "I swear to you, O sage, that I shall once more show respect for the Brahmanas. Let not my lineage perish, nor the noble blood that flows through me be extinguished. It would be a travesty if those who have wronged the Brahmanas were to continue their lineages unscathed." Janamejaya's words tumbled forth in a torrent of emotion as he begged Sanaka to instruct him on the path to righteousness. He vowed to mend his ways and sought the sage's guidance, pleading for wisdom like that of a learned preceptor or a loving father. Sanaka gazed upon the king with eyes that shone like stars in the night sky. His voice was gentle as he replied, "A person devoid of wisdom may indeed commit many errors, but one who has attained true wisdom is never angry with those who err, for when one ascends to the pinnacle of wisdom, they behold all creatures with compassion and understanding." The sage's words dripped like honeyed nectar, soothing Janamejaya's troubled soul. Sanaka continued, a person who incurs censure from good men who shuns their company and hides from their view shall never attain true happiness or understand the propriety of actions. You know, O king, what is expected of a Brahmana, as laid down in the Vedas and other scriptures. And Jaya listened intently, his heart drinking in the sage's words. Like a parched traveler at an oasis, he vowed to change his ways, to seek tranquility of mind, and to let the Brahmanas be his refuge. With tears streaming down his face, Janamejaya pledged before Saunaka that he would never again seek to extinguish virtue. He begged for the sage's blessing, promising to employ himself in the good of all creatures. Ever remembering the mandates of righteousness, Saunaka smiled benevolently upon the king, his eyes shining with warmth and compassion. I do not reproach you from fear or narrowness of mind, he said, but I have a desire to guide you on. In a grand assembly, Saunaka spoke to King Janamejaya, whose heart had been troubled by the weight of his past actions. Saunaka's words were like a soothing balm, calming the king's agitated soul and guiding him towards righteousness. Your Majesty, Saunaka began, you have indeed undergone a remarkable transformation. From being stern and unforgiving, you have now turned your gaze towards righteousness. Your decision to renounce luxurious pleasures and devote yourself to rigorous penance is truly admirable. The assembly was filled with whispers of awe as Saunaka continued. It is not surprising that those who are accustomed to wealth and power should become liberal, but it is indeed remarkable when one who has been steeped in luxury chooses the path of renunciation. Saunaka then spoke of the cleansing power of sacrifice, gift-giving, compassion, the Veda's truth, and well-performed penance. He emphasized that these practices were essential for kings, as they would bring about great merit and blessedness. The assembly listened intently as Saunaka recited the verses of Yatai, a wise king who had spoken of the importance of renouncing worldly attachments in old age. Saunaka continued to guide King Janamejaya towards righteousness, encouraging him to visit sacred sites such as Mahabharat, Pushkara, Pravhasa, and Manasa. He explained that bathing in these places would grant the king longevity and vitality. Saunaka also spoke of the importance of liberality and renunciation, citing the words of Manu, who had said that renunciation was better than liberality. As the assembly listened to Saunaka's words, they were filled with a sense of hope and renewal. The king too felt his heart lift as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Saunaka then spoke of the importance of self-control and the dangers of associating with wicked individuals. He emphasized that one should strive to become like a thunderbolt, swiftly dispelling evil influences. The assembly was electrified by Saunaka's words, and King Janamejaya felt his resolve strengthened. He knew that he had been given a second chance, an opportunity to redeem himself and earn the esteem of the world. With renewed determination, the king vowed to rule with justice and compassion, seeking the counsel of wise men like Saunaka. As the assembly dispersed, King Janamejaya felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew that he had been given a rare gift, the chance to start anew, to leave his past mistakes behind and forge a new path towards righteousness. And so, with the heart full of hope and determination, the king began his journey towards redemption. The wise Saunaka, who had guided King Janamejaya on this path, smiled knowingly as he watched the king depart. He knew that the road to righteousness was long and arduous. In the midst of a somber atmosphere, Yudhishthira's inquiry sparked the tale from Bhishma about an ancient encounter between a vulture and a jackal. In the Namisha forest, the Brahmana had lost his young son to infantile convulsions, and the family was consumed by grief. As they prepared to cremate their childis, they stood at the crematorium, holding the lifeless body of their loved one. A vulture soaked down its piercing gaze, scanning the scene with words that dripped like honeyed poison. The bird spoke, "Leave this place, and do not tarry, for you have only to cast off one child. Thousands of men and women come here every day, never to return. The universe is filled with weal, and will union and disunion are but fleeting moments. Your kin will disappear just as you have when the time ordained by time comes to pass." The vulture's words struck a chord in the hearts of the grieving family members. Their anguish began to subside, and they placed their child on the ground, preparing to depart. Just as they were about to turn away, a jackal emerged from its den, its dark fur glistening in the fading light. With an impassioned voice, the jackal pleaded with the family, "Do not abandon your child. This is a moment of multifarious virtue. Perhaps, just perhaps, this child may return to life. Leave behind only a few blades of cues, grass on the ground, and cast off your attachment. Multifaceted are the virtues of this hour. The jackal's words were laced with emotion, echoing the love that even beasts and birds show towards their young. The family was torn between the vulture's stark realism and the jackal's hopeful words. As they hesitated, the vulture interjected once more, "Fools, why do you mourn for a lifeless body? Your own lives are filled with sin. Practice penances to cleanse yourselves of your transgressions. Lamentations will not bring back the dead. It is in consequence of ill luck that this child has departed, plunging you into infinite grief." The vulture's words dripped with disdain for human attachment. Wealth, kind gold, precious gems, all have their root in penances. Penances are born from Iga, and the measure of weal or woe is dependent on acts done in a previous life. Each creature comes into this world bearing its own burden of good and bad deeds. The vulture's voice was like a cold wind stripping away the family's attachment to their child. In the face of these opposing views, the jackal lamented, "The affection cherished by your weeping selves has been lessened by that light-brained vulture. Even this must be the case, since in consequence of his well-applied words fraught with trank." In the midst of a heated debate, Yudhishthira posed a thought-provoking question to his revered grandfather Bhishma. "Grandsire," he asked, "what should be done when a weak and feeble person, driven by folly and boastfulness, provokes a powerful foe who resides nearby? How can the former defend himself against the latter's wrath?" Bhishma pondered the query for a moment before responding. "This situation reminds me of an ancient tale from the forest of Himavat." He began to weave a narrative that would transport his audience to a bygone era. In those days, there stood a majestic salmalite tree on one of the heights of the Himalayas. For centuries, it had grown and flourished, its branches stretching wide in all directions. Like a canopy of protection, the tree's trunk was as massive as a mountain peak, with leaves and twigs that seemed to touch the sky under its shade. Weary elephants would rest after their long treks, while countless other animals and birds made it their home. As Bhishma continued his tale, he described how Narada, a wise sage, had once approached Salmalai in awe of its grandeur. "O Salmalai," Narada said, "you are indeed a wondrous sight. Your branches and trunk are as strong as the gods themselves. Yea, I have never seen any of them broken by the wind, which is known for its ferocity. Is it true that Pavana, the god of the wind, has befriended you and protects you from harm?" Salmalai's majestic presence seemed to radiate an air of peace and serenity. Bhishma described how the tree's verdure was a testament to Pavana's favor, allowing it to thrive despite its immense size. As the seasons changed, Salmalai would burst forth with blossoms, filling the air with sweet melodies sung by the birds that made their home in its branches. The scene came alive as Bhishma painted vivid pictures of elephants bathed in sweat and trumpeting with joy approaching Salmalai to find solace under its shade. Other animals from the forest will also gather around the tree, contributing to its beauty and splendor. Even brahmanas and ascetics would seek refuge beneath its branches, drawn by the sense of peace that emanated from Salmalai. Bhishma finished his tale. Yudhishthira's question seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a deeper understanding of the delicate balance between strength and protection. The narrative had transported them to a world where even the most majestic of beings could find solace in the favor of a powerful Oli, much like Salmalai's friendship with Pavana. In a lush forest, a majestic Salmalai tree stood tall, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. Narada, a wise and revered sage, approached the tree and began to converse with its Salmalai. He said, "It's clear that you have a special bond with the wind god. Your words, 'I am thine,' seem to have earned his protection." The Salmalai responded, its voice deep and resonant. "Narada, the wind is neither my friend nor Ole. His power is nothing compared to mine. In fact, my strength far surpasses his. It's only about an 18th part of what I possess." As Narada listened, a fierce gust of wind swept through the forest, uprooting trees and sending debris flying. But Salmalai remained unscathed, its branches flexing in the storm. Narada's eyes widened with amazement. "Salmalai, your bravery is unbearable," he said, "but I must warn you, there's no creature that can rival the wind god's power, not even Indra, Yama, or Vaisravana, the lord of the waters, can match his might." The sage's words dripped with conviction. But Salmalai remained unimpressed. "No, my strength, Narada," it replied. "I have seen the wind god unleash his fury upon the world, tearing down mountains and trees alike. But I've also seen him fall before me, repeatedly broken by my own power. The tree's words were laced with a quiet confidence that left Narada speechless. Undeterred, the sage pressed on Samala. You're making a grave mistake. Your words are an insult to the wind god, who is the giver of life and the cause of all living things. When he wields his power properly, creatures thrive. When improperly, calamities ensue. Narada's voice grew stern as he continued. Your refusal to acknowledge the wind god's supremacy is a sign of weakness in your understanding. Samala stood firm, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. I know the truth, Narada, that I possess strength beyond the wind god's reach. My words are not empty boasts. They're a testament to my power and my defiance. As the sage finished speaking, a flash of anger crossed his face. Seal report. Your insults to the wind god himself, Narada declared. You've overstepped, Samala. You've shown disrespect to one who is worthy of worship. Your words will not go unchallenged. I'll ensure that the wind god knows of your contempt. With a final glance at the tree, Narada turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving Samala standing tall amidst the whispers of the wind. In the majestic realm of ancient India, Ishmat stood before his audience, recounting a tale of might and wisdom. He began by describing the Samala tree, situated on the breast of Himavat, its branches stretching towards the sky like outstretched arms, its roots digging deep into the earth. The Samala had spoken, Gil of the wind god, before Narada, the celestial messenger who had conveyed the tree's words to the god of the wind. Narada warned the wind god, O mighty one, do not let me repeat the Samala's words in your presence. You are the supreme being, superior and powerful beyond compare. Your wrath can rival that of the destroyer himself. The wind god, enraged by the Samala's insults, set out to confront the trees. He approached the Samala. The wind god declared, You have spoken ill of me before Narada. Know this, I am the god of the wind. I shall show you my power and might. You may think yourself superior, but it is only because the grand sire Brahma rested beneath you during creation that I have spared your life. Thus far the wind god's words dripped with disdain as he accused the Samala of disregarding him. Like a common thing, the Samala, unmoved by the wind god's threats, laughed in derision. Show me your might, O god of the wind. Vomit all your wrath upon me. What harm can you do to me? Even if your power were truly yours alone, I would still not fear you, for I am superior to you in wisdom and understanding. The Samala's words cut deep, for they spoke of a truth that the wind god could not deny. Physical strength was one thing, but true might lay in the realm of the mind. As night fell, the Samala reflected on his own limitations. He realized that he was indeed inferior to the wind god in terms of physical power. Yet he also knew that he possessed a quality the other trees lacked: intelligence. The Samala thought to himself, if only the other trees relied on their understanding as I do, they would not fear the wind god's wrath. But alas, they are blind to the true nature of things. As the stars twinkled above, the Samala's thoughts turned inward. He recognized that his own words to Narada had been false, and that he was indeed weaker than the wind god. Yet he also knew that in the realm of wisdom he stood alone among the trees. The Samala's introspection revealed a profound truth, that intelligence and understanding were the true measures of strength, not physical might. Bhishma's tale came to an end, leaving his audience to ponder the words of the Samala tree in this ancient. In the heart of a forest there stood an ancient Samala tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. Its leaves rustled softly as it whispered secrets to the wind that caressed its boughs. But beneath its majestic appearance, the Samala harbored a secret sorrow. It had made a fateful decision, one that would change its fate forever. With a heavy heart, the Samala tree resolved to sacrifice all its branches, principled and subsidiary, in an act of self-purification. As the sun rose over the forest, the tree stood steadfast, its limbs severed from its trunk. The wind, sensing the Samala's resolve, approached with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. The wind with a fierce gust swept towards the Samala, felling large trees in its path. But as it beheld the tree, now divested of its top branches, leaves, and flowers, its demeanor changed. The wind's rage gave way to joy, and it addressed the Samala with words that echoed through the forest, filled with rage. O Samala, I would have done to thee precisely what thou hast done to thyself by lopping off all the branches. Thou art now divested of the proud top and flowers, and thou art now without the shoots and leaves, in consequence of thy own evil counsels. Thou hast been brought under my power. The Samalai tree felt a deep sense of shame as it listened to the wind's words. Memories of Nereda's cautionary tales flooded its mind, and it began to repent for its folly. The Samalai realized that by provoking the enmity of a powerful one it had sealed its own fate of Ishma. The venerable sage continued his tale. Even in this way, O Tadjura maintains, a weak and foolish person, by provoking the enmity of a powerful one, is at last obliged to repent like the Samalayan fable, even when possessed of equal might. People do not suddenly wage hostilities with those that have injured them. On the other hand, they display their might. Gradually, O King Vishnu's words woo a lesson for King Yudhishthira. A person of foolish understanding should never provoke the hostility of one that is possessed of intelligence. In such cases, the intelligence of the intelligent man and traits, the subject upon which it is employed, like fire pincraying a heap of dry grass. Intelligence is the most precious possession that a person can have. As Bhishma spoke, his words conjured images of the great battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The mighty Duryodhana with his 11 Ikshvahanas had clashed against Arjuna's single-handed might, and though the Kaurava forces were superior in number, they were.
In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the king, approached Bhishma, the venerable patriarch, with a burning desire to understand the root cause of sin and its far-reaching consequences. Bhishma, sensing the depth of Yudhishthira's curiosity, began to unfold the intricate tapestry of covetousness. Covetousness is the great destroyer, Bhishma declared, his voice like a gentle breeze on a summer day. It is the source from which sin and irreligiousness flow, along with great misery. As he spoke, his words wove a spell of introspection over the assembly, drawing them into the depths of their own hearts. Bhishma continued to weave his tale, revealing how covetousness gives rise to wrath, lust, loss of judgment, deception, pride, arrogance, and malice. He described it as an insatiable passion that cannot be satisfied by any amount of wealth or possessions, likening it to the boundless esteem that can never be filled. As Bhishma spoke, his words painted vivid pictures in the minds of those listening. They saw how covetousness clouds one's judgment, leading even the wisest and most learned individuals to act with cunning and hypocrisy. They beheld how men driven by covetousness become envious, angry, and ruthless, their hearts as hard as stony. Yet Bhishma did not leave his audience in a state of despair. He revealed that there existed individuals who had transcended the grasp of covetousness, whose souls shone with the radiance of virtue. These were men and women who lived in harmony with nature, free from attachment to worldly objects, their hearts filled with compassion and kindness. Bhishma described these virtuous individuals as those who feared neither life nor death, who had renounced animal food and material desires, and who had dedicated themselves to the pursuit of righteousness. They were men and women of great courage, whose words were infused with truth and sincerity, their hearts filled with love for all beings. As Bhishma finished speaking, a sense of awe settled over the assembly. Yudhishthira, his eyes aglow with understanding, turned to Bhishma with gratitude, knowing that he had been given a precious gift, the insight into the nature of covetousness and its opposite virtue. In the midst of their conversations on the nature of evil, Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, turned to his grandfather Bhishma with a curious mind. "Grandsire," he said, "you have spoken about the root of all evils being covetousness, but I wish to hear more about ignorance in detail." Vishnu's eyes sparkled as he began to speak, his voice filled with wisdom and compassion. At Yudhishthira, a person who commits sin through ignorance is one who does not realize the gravity of their actions. They do not understand that their time on this earth is limited, and they consistently harbor hatred towards those who are good-natured as a result. They incur infamy in the world. Yudhishthira's curiosity was piqued, and he asked for more information. "I desire to hear about the origin, place, growth, decay, rise, root, inseparable attribute, course, time, cause, and consequence of ignorance." He paused, his voice filled with conviction. "The misery that we experience here is all born of ignorance." Bhishma nodded in understanding his expression. "Solemn attachment, hate, loss of judgment, joy, sorrow, vanity, lust, anger, pride, procrastination, idleness, desire, aversion, jealousy. All these sinful acts are known by the common name of ignorance." He paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. "Know this, Yudhishthira, Ignorance and covetousness are two sides of the same coin. They share the same substance and produce the same fruit, and false ignorance arises from covetousness. Just as a tree grows from its roots as covetousness grows, so does ignorance. Wherever there is covetousness, ignorance exists, and when covetousness decreases, ignorance also. When Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind absorbing the wisdom of Bhishma's words, what is the root of this covetousness? Grandsire, he asked of Bhishma's eyes seemed to gaze into the depths of time. The root of covetousness is loss of judgment, and once one loses their judgment, they become trapped in a cycle of ignorance and covetousness. This cycle has no end, Yudhishthira, for it is eternal. As Bhishma finished speaking, the atmosphere around them seemed to grow heavy with the weight of his words. But there are those who have transcended this cycle. He said softly, Janek, Yuvanaswa Vrishadar Vipresnejit, all great kings who acquired heaven by repressing their covetousness, you too, Yudhishthira, can achieve the same, if you avoid.
In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the king with a virtuous soul, sought the counsel of his revered grandsire Bhishma with an eagerness that burned like a fire. He asked, O grandsire, what is it that brings great merit to one who studies the Vedas and strives for virtue? What are those few duties that should be prioritized above all others? Bhishma's eyes sparkled with delight as he began to speak. My child, I shall impart to you the secrets of self-restraint, which is the highest among all virtues. It is the eternal duty of a Brahmana, and from it comes the true fruition of one's deeds. He paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. Self-restraint surpasses even charity, sacrifice, and the study of the Vedas in its merit. It enhances one's energy, purifies the soul, and leads to the highest blessedness. I have not heard of any other duty that can equal self-restraint. Through it a person acquires great virtue, and their mind remains cheerful. As Bhishma spoke, his words dripped with conviction, like nectar poured into a parched throat. Yudhishthira listened intently, his eyes drinking in the wisdom of his grandsire. What are the indications of self-restraint? Yudhishthira asked, his curiosity piqued. Bhishma smiled and began to enumerate the virtues that comprised self-restraint: forgiveness, patience, abstention from injury, impartiality, truth, sincerity, conquest of the senses, and many more. These are the qualities that make a person self-restrained. Bhishma said, such an individual avoids adulation and slander and is free from envy and malice. They never incur obloquy, and their heart remains pure and content. As Bhishma spoke, his words wove a tapestry of wisdom that seemed to envelop Yudhishthira in its gentle folds. The king's eyes shone with understanding, and he felt his own soul stirring with the desire for self-restraint. What is the ultimate reward of self-restraint? Yudhishthira asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vishnu's face glowed with a deep wisdom as he replied, the man who practices universal friendliness, possesses virtuous behavior, and is conversant with the knowledge of the soul. Such a person attains to emancipation in that moment. Yudhishthira felt his heart expand with joy, like the blooming of a lotus flower in the morning sun. He knew that he had been given a precious gift, the wisdom of self-restraint, and he vowed to follow its path, come what may. As the assembly dispersed, Bhishma's words lingered in the air, like the fragrance of.
In the midst of a grand assembly, Bhishma stood tall, his eyes gleaming with wisdom as he began to speak. The wise ones, he said, declare that all things have their roots in penance. One who has not undergone this discipline cannot hope to reap the rewards of even their own deeds. As he spoke, a subtle, yet palpable, energy seemed to fill the air. It was as if the very fabric of existence was being woven anew by the power of Bhishma's words. The Creator, he continued, brought forth the universe through penance. The rishis acquired the sacred Vedas through their devotion and discipline. Even the food we eat, the fruits that ripen on the trees, and the roots that grow in the earth, all these are a result of the power of penance. The assembly listened with rapt attention as Bhishma's words painted vivid pictures in their minds. They saw the rishis, their eyes closed in contemplation, their bodies swaying gently as they chanted the ancient mantras. They saw the Creator, his hands, moving with purpose and precision as he shaped the world into being the sins, and Antidotes Bhishma went on all work through the power of penance. The accomplishment of all purposes depends upon it. Whatever seems unattainable can be won through discipline and devotion. As he spoke, a subtle shift seemed to take place in the assembly, as if each member was being nudged towards a deeper understanding of their own potential. Bhishma's words turned to those who had strayed from the path, the drunkard. He said, "The one who takes what is not theirs, the one guilty of foeticide, all can be cleansed through proper practice of penance." And then, with a gentle smile, he spoke of the many forms that penance could take. Abstention from food, he declared, is the highest and best form of penance. Bhishma's words reached their climax. The assembly was bathed in an air of reverence. They saw the rishis, their faces aglow with inner light as they practiced the ultimate discipline, renunciation. They saw the gods themselves, their celestial forms shining bright with the radiance of penance. Seeing this moment, it seemed that the very boundaries between human and divine were dissolving. Bhishma's words had awakened a deep understanding within each member of the assembly that through penance anything was possible. Thus, he concluded, it is through penance that the gods acquired their superiority, through penance that we may acquire our own.
In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the righteous king, stood tall with an eagerness to learn about the virtue of truth. He sought the wisdom of Bhishma, the venerable grandsire who had lived a life of unparalleled devotion and integrity. "Said, 'Your Majesty,' Bhishma began, his voice resonating like a gentle breeze on a summer day, 'truth is the bedrock upon which all virtues stand. It is an eternal duty that transcends the four orders of society. The Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Truth is not just a virtue, but a refuge of penance, and the very essence of Brahma itself.' As Bhishma spoke, his eyes sparkled with an inner light, illuminating the path to truth. There are 13 forms of truth. He continued, each one a manifestation of its pure and unadulterated essence. Impartiality is the ability to see beyond the veil of duality, to behold all beings as equal in the eyes of the divine. Self-control is the mastery over one's desires, fears, and attachments, allowing one to walk the path of righteousness with equanimity. Bhishma paused, surveying the assembly with a gentle gaze. Forgiveness is the attribute that enables us to endure both pleasure and pain, good and evil, with an unwavering heart. Modesty is the virtue that adorns our speech and actions, guiding us towards compassion and kindness. Endurance is the strength that arises from patience, allowing us to walk through life's trials with courage and resilience. As he spoke, Bhishma's words wove a tapestry of wisdom, each thread representing a facet of truth. Renunciation is the letting go of attachment to worldly possessions and desires, freeing us to live in harmony with nature, and the divine goodness is the virtue that radiates from within, inspiring us to act selflessly towards all beings. Fortitude is the strength that arises from inner peace, allowing us to navigate life's challenges with equanimity. The assembly listened with rapt attention as Bhishma revealed the 5 attributes of truth: compassion and abstention from injury. These 13 forms of truth, he declared, are not separate virtues, but different facets of the same radiant gem. They support and strengthen each other, forming an unbreakable bond that upholds righteousness. As the sun began to set on the assembly, Bhishma concluded his discourse with a profound statement: "There is no duty higher than truth, and no sin more heinous than untruth. Truth is the very foundation of righteousness, for it is from this sacred wellspring that all virtues flow." The assembly erupted in applause as Yudhishthira bowed reverently to Bhishma, acknowledging the wisdom that had been imparted. In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, turned to Bhishma, the venerable sage, with a question that had been weighing on his mind. "Tell me, O Bhishma," he said, "everything about those forces that stir up wrath and lust within us and bring sorrow, loss of judgment, and malice into our lives." Bhishma, the bull of Varaha's race, nodded gravely, his eyes shining with wisdom. "These 13 vices are formidable foes that beset all creatures." He began, "They approach us from every side, Like wolves on the prowl, and afflict us with their power, they bring forth grief and sin, and it is essential for every mortal to understand them. Yudhishthira listened intently as Bhishma explained the origin of each vice. Wrath, he said, springs from covetousness, and is strengthened by the faults of others. But forgiveness can tame it and make it disappear. He paused for a moment before continuing. Lust, on the other hand, arises from resolution, and indulgence feeds its flames. Yet when wisdom turns away from it, lust dies out. Vishwa's words painted vivid pictures in Yudhishthira's mind. Envy, he said, arises between wrath and covetousness, but compassion and self-knowledge can dispel it. He spoke of the fleeting nature of worldly objects and how knowledge brings us to disregard them. In men of intelligence, he added, envy quickly disappears when true wisdom is gained. As Bhishma continued his explanation, Yudhishthira's eyes grew wide with understanding. The loss of judgment, Bhishma said, has its roots in ignorance and proceeds from sinful habits. But when we seek the company of wise men, this vice hides its head. He spoke of conflicting scriptures and how they can lead to diverse desires. Yet true knowledge can allay these desires. Bhishma's words wove a tapestry of emotions as he described the vices that beset humanity. Grief, he said, arises from affection awakened by separation. But when we learn that the dead do not return, our grief subsides. He spoke of incapacity to bear others' good and how it proceeds from wrath and covetousness. Yet compassion for all creatures can extinguish this vice. As Bhishma concluded his explanation, Yudhishthira's face reflected a deep understanding. Malice, he said, springs from the abandonment of truth and indulgence in wickedness, but waiting upon the wise and good can dispel it. He spoke of pride, which arises from birth, learning, and prosperity. Yet when these three are truly,
the sun had just begun to rise over the kingdom, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets of Hastinapura. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the 5 Pandava brothers, stood before his revered teacher Bhishma, seeking guidance on the nature of malevolence with a deep sense of curiosity and concern. Yudhishthira asked of Bharata, I have observed many good people in my life, but I do not understand those who are wicked and cruel. They seem to be avoided by all like thorns and pitfalls that one must steer clear of. Bhishma's eyes, wise and knowing, gazed into the distance as he began to speak. A malevolent person, O Yudhishthira, is consumed by deep-seated desire to cause harm to others. They are driven by an insatiable hunger for wickedness, and their actions are guided by malice and deceit. They slander those who are innocent, spreading lies and half-truths like a deadly poison that spreads its evil influence far and witty. As Bhishma spoke, his words painted a vivid picture of the malevolent person. They regard themselves as victims, always feeling cheated of their due, even when they have been given more than enough. They boast of their own acts of charity, but in reality, they are stingy and miserly, unwilling to share with others what is rightfully theirs. Yudhishthira listened intently, his face a mask of concentration as he tried to grasp the complexities of malevolence. Bhishma continued, a malevolent person sees the world through malicious eyes, always looking for ways to exploit and harm others. They are arrogant and boastful, often keeping company with those who share their wicked intentions. As the morning wore on, Bhishma's words painted a stark picture of the malevolent individual. They fear and suspect everyone they meet, never trusting anyone or anything. They are foolish and short-sighted, unable to distinguish between good and evil. They take pleasure in causing harm to others, and their actions are guided by cruelty and malice. Yudhishthira's eyes widened as he listened, his mind reeling with the realization of just how pervasive malevolence could be. Bhishma's words were like a mirror held up to the soul, revealing the darkest corners of human nature. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Bhishma concluded his teaching. A person who dedicates their first portion to the Brahmanas and shares what remains with friends and kinsmen is one who will attain great felicity in this world and infinite happiness in the next. But a malevolent and wicked person, O Yudhishthira, should always be avoided by a man of wisdom. As the sun reached its peak in the sky, Yudhishthira felt a sense of in the midst of a gathering. Bhishma stood tall, his words carrying weight as he addressed King Bharata. For those pious and impoverished Brahmanas, who have been robbed of their wealth in performing sacrifices, well versed in the Vedas, and desirous of acquiring righteousness, wealth, and knowledge should be given. He emphasized that these Brahmanas were not only vessels of the Vedas, but also the very essence of all sacrifices. The king should make presents of divers kinds of valuable wealth unto them. He said Bhishma's words flowed like a river effortlessly navigating the complexities of duty and virtue, that Brahmana, who has a sufficiency of stores for feeding his family for 3 or more years, deserves to drink the summa. He spoke of the king's role in ensuring the completion of sacrifices, even going so far as to take wealth from those who were averse to performing them. The assembly listened intently as Bhishma delved into the intricacies of social hierarchy. A Sudra has no competence for performing a sacrifice. He declared the king should therefore take away wealth from a Sudra household to aid in the completion of a Brahmana's sacrifice. This was not merely a matter of duty, but also a means of earning great merit. Bhishma's words turned to the subject of charity, and the Brahmana's right to claim it. That Brahmana, who has been forced by law to go without 6 meals, may take away according to the rule of a person that cares only for today what is necessary for a single meal from any place. He emphasized that this act should be done with permission, and the Brahmana should inform the king. The assembly was rapt as Bhishma spoke of the importance of protecting Brahmanas. Having ascertained a Brahmana's learning and behavior, the king should make a provision for him and protect him as a father protects his son. He warned that Brahmana who became afflicted with hunger did so through no fault of their own, but rather due to the negligence of the Kshatriya. Bhishma's words continued to flow like a river, touching on various aspects of duty and virtue. One should never worship the deities in sacrifices. Where no dakshina is given, he cautioned such an act would bring about the destruction of one's children, animals, and heaven. He spoke of the importance of performing the Vaisvanara sacrifice at the end of each year. As Bhishma concluded his address, King Bharata listened intently, his eyes wide with understanding. The assembly was silent, absorbing the weight of Bhishma's words. It was as if the very fabric of society had been woven in with duty and virtue taking center stage. In the midst of a sullen gathering, Nakila, the skilled warrior and son of Madurai, approached Bhishma, the venerable grandsire of the Kuras, who lay wounded on a bed of arrows. With curiosity and respect, Nakila posed a question that had been weighing on his mind: which is truly the most superior weapon in battle, the bow or the sword? He explained that while the bow was often regarded as the premier instrument of war, he believed a skilled swordsman could protect himself even when the bow was broken or its steeds were weakened. Bhishma, the master of the science of archery, smiled at Nakila's query and began to recount the ancient tales of creation. He spoke of the universe's origin, born from the darkness of the infinite expanse, where the primal being, the grandsire, emerged to shape the cosmos. With a mere thought he brought forth the elements: wind, fire, sun, sky, earth, and the celestial bodies that govern Timaeus. Bhishma continued his narrative. Nakila's eyes grew wide with wonder. He heard of the sages who were born from the grandsires, well, including Marachaya, Tripalasya, and Rudra, who possessed great energy and wisdom. These sages begot children, and their descendants populated the universe with diverse creatures, from gods and pitras to rakshasas, animals, birds, and plants. However, not all beings were created equal. The Daityas and Danavas, led by Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha, began to challenge the gods and sages, disregarding duty and righteousness. They persecuted other creatures with their rod of chastisement. Filled with pride and devoid of compassion, the grandsire Brahman, accompanied by the wise sages, ascended a majestic mountain peak adorned with jewels and gems, where the stars seemed to rest like lotuses on a lake. After 1,000 years, he arranged for a grand sacrifice according to the scriptures, inviting the gods and rishis to participate. The sacred ritual progressed. A being emerged from the sacrificial fire, radiating splendor equal to that of the moon. His dark complexion, keen teeth, lean stomach, and towering stature commanded awe. The earth trembled, the scene churned with turbulent waves, meteors flashed through the sky, and all creatures quaked in fear. Brahman addressed the rishis, gods, and Gandharvas. This being was thought of by me, possessed of great energy. His name is as a sword or scimitar. I have created him for the protection of the world and the destruction of the enemies of the gods. The being transformed into a magnificent sword, highly polished, sharp-edged, and shining like the all-destructive being at the end of the Yuga. Brahman
The sun had set over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered in the courtyard. Bishma, the venerable patriarch of the Kuru clan, had finished speaking, and Yudhishthira, accompanied by his brothers Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, and Emma, returned to their palaces. They entered. King Dhritarashtra addressed his sons with vigor as the fifth member of the family. "My dear sons," he said, "the world is governed by three principles: virtue, wealth, and desire. But which one is the most important? Which one should we prioritize in our pursuit of happiness and fulfillment?" He looked at each of them expectantly, waiting for their response of adieu. The wise and learned Ankul was the first to speak up. "Your Majesty," he began, "I have given this matter considerable thought, and I believe that virtue is the most important principle. It is the foundation upon which all else is built. Without virtue, we would be like a tree without roots, unstable and prone to destruction." He continued, "Virtue encompasses many qualities: compassion, forgiveness, sincerity, self-restraint, and truth. These are the possessions of virtue, and they are essential for achieving true happiness and fulfillment. We should strive to cultivate these virtues in our daily lives, just as a farmer tends to his crops to ensure a bountiful harvest." Arjuna, skilled in the science of profit, countered Vidura's argument. "Your Majesty," he said, "while virtue is indeed essential, wealth is also crucial for achieving our goals. Without wealth, we cannot acquire the means to practice virtue or satisfy our desires. The scriptures declare that wealth is the end of all actions, and it is the foundation upon which both virtue and desire are built." Nakula and Sahadeva, the twin sons of Mahabharat, chimed in next. "We agree with Arjuna," they said. "Acquiring wealth is essential for achieving our goals, but we must also strive to cultivate virtue. A person without wealth cannot gratify any desire, just as a person without virtue cannot acquire wealth. We should seek the acquisition of wealth with a devoted mind while also practicing virtue." The strong and passionate warrior was the last to speak. "I believe that desire is the most important principle," he said. "It is the driving force behind all actions, and it is the essence of both virtue and profit. Without desire, we would be like a tree without fruit, barren and unfulfilled." A continued desire takes many forms, but its ultimate goal is to bring us happiness and fulfillment. We should not try to suppress our desires, but rather learn to channel them in a positive way. Just as a river flows towards the ocean, so too should.
The sun had set on that fateful night, and Gautama, a renowned Brahmana, had bid farewell to his home. He began his journey towards the sea, accompanied by a caravan of merchants who were seasoned travelers of the Ocean's waves. As they traversed through a valley, their path was disrupted by an enraged elephant, which left a trail of destruction in its wake. The majority of the merchants fell victim to the beast's fury, and Gautama, with his life hanging in the balance, narrowly escaped the Chausis. He fled towards the north. The Brahmana found himself lost and alone, wandering through a dense forest. Like a Kimpurasha, his journey took him across unfamiliar terrain until he stumbled upon a winding road that led to the Ocean shores. The scent of blooming flowers wafted through the air as he entered a heavenly forest teeming with mango trees that bore fruit and blossoms throughout the year. This enchanted land was inhabited by Yachas and Kinnaras, its beauty rivaling the sacred woods of Nandana. In heaven, Gautama's footsteps echoed through the forest as he marveled at the Salus, palmyras, and Tamalis trees that adorned the landscape. The air vibrated with the sweet melodies of birds from diverse species, while Barundas winged creatures with human-like faces harmonized in perfect unison. As he wandered deeper into this idyllic heaven, Gautama's senses were overwhelmed by the symphony of nature's choristers. The Brahmana's journey continued as he chanced upon a breathtakingly beautiful spot covered with golden sands that shimmered like the very heavens themselves. At its center stood an imposing banyan tree, its spherical top and numerous branches radiating elegance and grandeur. The air beneath its canopy was perfumed with sandalwood, creating an ambience reminiscent of the grandsire's court itself. Entranced by this enchanting sanctuary, Gautama settled down, his heart filled with joy. As he sat there, a gentle breeze carrying the fragrance of various flowers caressed him, infusing his being with celestial pleasure. The Brahmana's exhaustion from his ordeal soon gave way to slumber. lulled by the soothing melody of the wind. Meanwhile, a majestic bird named Nadajinga, renowned for its wisdom and beauty, returned to its abode in this sacred spot. This prince of cranes, born to a celestial maiden and sage Cassiopeia, was known far and wide as Rajat Harman, adorned with radiant ornaments. The bird shone like a celestial being as Nadajinga settled into its nest. Gautama's eyes snapped open, his gaze fixed on the magnificent creature. The Brahmana's stomach growled with hunger, and his eyes gleamed with desire to slay the bird for sustenance, however, as he beheld Rajat Harman's splendor. In the midst of the forest, Bhishma stood as witness to an extraordinary encounter between Gautama, a wise Brahmana, and Rajat Harman, a majestic bird. As the tale unfolds, we find ourselves drawn into the enchanting world of these two noble souls. Gautama's eyes widened with wonder as he listened to the words of wisdom pouring forth from Rajat Harman's beak. The bird's words were like nectar, filling Gautama's heart with curiosity and awe. He couldn't help but gaze at Rajat Harman, his eyes fixed intently on this magnificent creature. Rajat Harman, sensing Gautama's fascination, welcomed him warmly. "O Brahmana," he said, "I am the son of Cassiopeia, born to one of Daksha's daughters. You are a guest in my domain today, and I offer you hospitality according to the sacred rites." With these words, Rajat Harman ushered Gautama into his sanctuary, where the salad flowers bloomed like a celestial bed. As the sun began to set, Rajat Harman presented Gautama with an exquisite feast of fish caught from the depths of the Bhagirathi River. The aroma of roasting fish wafted through the air, and Gautama's senses were transported to a realm of pure delight. After enjoying his meal, Rajat Harman gently fanned Gautama with his wings, dispelling any fatigue that may have lingered. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Rajat Harman asked Gautama about his lineage. The Brahmana replied, "I am known as Gautama, a humble Brahmana." And with that he fell silent, lost in thought. Undeterred by Gautama's reserve, Rajat Harman offered him a soft bed of leaves and fragrant flowers, where the weary Brahmana lay down to rest. As morning broke, Rajat Harman turned to Gautama once more. "Tell me, O noble one," he asked, "what brings you to this place?" Gautama revealed his struggles with poverty and his desire to acquire wealth by traveling to the sea. Moved by compassion, Rajat Harman declared, "You shall not suffer from want. I am your friend now, and I will ensure that you succeed in acquiring wealth." With these words of encouragement, Gautama set off on his journey, guided by Rajat Harman's wise counsel. As he walked along the winding path, the scent of sandalwood, willow, and birch trees filled the air, their refreshing shade invigorating his spirit. He soon found himself at the gates of Maruvraja, the city ruled by Virupaksha, the mighty king of the Rakshasas. The gatekeepers, swift as hawks, hastened to convey Gautama's prisons to their ruler. "Come quickly," they urged him. The king, in the midst of autumn's vibrant hues, when the month of Kartika dawned bright, Bhishma's tale unfolded like a rich tapestry. It was then that Gautama, a Brahmana from the middle country, found himself in the grand apartment of Virupaksha, the Rakshasa king. The latter, with reverence and offerings, welcomed his guest to an exquisite seat. As they sat together, Virupaksha asked about Gautama's lineage, his study of the Vedas, and his observance of the Brahmacharya vow. But instead of answering the questions, Gautama simply revealed his name and birthplace. The king, though disappointed by Gautama's lack of Brahmanic splendor and Vedic studies, pressed on with another inquiry about his country of residence. Gautama, with a quiet honesty, replied that he resided in a village of hunters, married to a Sudra widow. His words hung in the air like autumn leaves rustling in the wind. Virupaksha's thoughts turned inward, weighing the situation and pondering how to acquire merit. He reflected on his friendship with Rajat Harman, Gautama's friend from afar, and knew that he must do what was agreeable to his dear relative. His fate would have it. 1,000 learned Brahmanas, adorned in their finest attire, arrived at the palace. The Rakshasa king Virupaksha received them with due honors, spreading out skins for them to sit upon. He offered sesame seeds, green blades of grass, and water as a sacred ritual. Some among them were chosen to represent the Visitavas, Pitras, and deities of fire. Anointed with sandalpast and flowers, the Brahmanas, resplendent in their splendor, received plates of gold adorned with engravings, filled with exquisite food prepared with ghee and honey. This was a custom Virupaksha observed every year on the days of full moon in Ashadha and Maha, and especially on Kartika's night, when he showered his guests with wealth, gold, silver, jewels, gems, pearls, diamonds, lapis lazuli stones, deerskins, and rank skins. The Brahmanas, prepared to leave, Virupaksha addressed them. Take from these jewels and gems as much as you wish, and can hope to bear away. He also instructed them to take the gold plates they had used for dinner with their hearts filled with delight. The Brahmanas departed, leaving behind a trail of splendor. Gautama, however, burdened by his heavy load of gold, struggled to carry it as he sat under the banyan tree where he first met the crane. Rajat appeared flapping his wings to find Gautama, and Disbal, his fatty. The prince of cranes offered food and worshipped Gautama. In the heart of the forest, under the shade of a majestic banyan tree, a fire crackled with high and blazing flames. A prince of birds, Rajat had kindled this fire for the comfort of his guest, who lay sleeping peacefully beside it. Unbeknownst to the bird, its post was not what he seemed, with a wicked heart and an ungrateful soul. Gautama, a Brahmana, prepared to slay his unsuspecting guest as the flames danced in the darkness. Gautama's eyes gleamed with malice. He peeled off Rajat feeders and down, then roasted the flesh on the fire. With a gluttonous delight he devoured the bird's meat, never once considering the gravity of his actions. The next morning, when Virupaksha the Rakshasa king inquired about Rajat whereabouts, Gautama was nowhere to be found. Virupaksha's concern turned to a